Let's take a little bit of time and talk about the idea of how do we create an inviting culture in the life of our church. And this even carries over into a little bit of a marketing conversation too. I know we could create an entire course just on church marketing. And so I'm not going to dive too deeply in just to marketing strategies and how to run Facebook ads and all that kind of stuff here in this course. We will bring up some of these conversations, do some live conversations specific to those marketing questions and marketing needs in our community through the app. And so if you're not a part of that community, I'm going to encourage you to dive into that community and join us on a regular basis as we tackle some of those pressing questions. And it gives us time to even be more specific to what marketing questions that you might have, for instance. But here's some things I want you to think about overall when it comes to creating an inviting culture in the life of your church. Number one, you really want to encourage people to share their stories. And so look for every opportunity you possibly can to capture their story, capture their testimony of what God is doing, how He's working in their lives. The nice thing is we live in such a video hungry world that being able to capture these things on video, even if it's just using your cell phone, will really, really capture and get those stories out there. People care more about the authenticity than necessarily how the production quality looks. And so pay attention to lighting, pay attention to sound, but the more important thing is get the content of what God has been doing in people's lives. We live in an era right now that how the church is operating, where we have more information about the Bible, about church, about Jesus than any time in human history. People aren't necessarily looking for more information. People are looking to experience what Jesus brings, what Jesus does in our life. And so capturing people's stories of life change and what He's doing will be incredibly important and help people stay connected to the life of your church. And so think through, even on baptism weekends, how are you sharing those stories? Those are naturally great stories. Capture on video. We require in our church, anytime somebody is getting baptized, that they allow us to video them just talking about how they came to Christ, what Jesus has done for them personally in their life as well. And we don't necessarily show all of them on a Sunday experience when the baptism, but we'll cut it down and we'll share children's and adults, and we'll have dramatic stories and not so dramatic stories. And we want to try to capture the whole realm of what does it mean just to be a Jesus follower, and what does it mean to experience Jesus's grace and His blessing in practical ways in our life. The other thing is utilize interviews. Use Facebook and Instagram to be able to just interview people in the life of your church, and expose your community, both your church community, but your outside community, to what God seems to be doing in the life of your church and how people's lives are being changed. Nothing will help you create a more inviting culture than just that in itself. The second thing is you got to give people a reason to invite their friends, family, and coworkers. This may sound harsh, but this is reality. People don't invite people to mediocrity. In other words, when's the last time that you went to an okay restaurant and then you went around and told everybody, man, you really, really got to go to this place because their burgers are the fries are but man, you got to try it out. We don't do that. We talk about the great experiences that we have. If we have a great experience at a restaurant, a great experience at a hotel, we're quick to share that information with our friends, our family, our coworkers. Man, I had tried out this new restaurant this weekend. It was unbelievable. You need to go try it out. And so sometimes I think people aren't actually inviting people to our church because they're embarrassed by the product of what our church actually puts out there. Aim for quality. Pay attention. If you can't pull certain things off, don't do them. If your video live stream is just not that high quality, I wouldn't put it out there until you get it to a level in which you feel comfortable and you're proud to put out there. I've seen a lot of, let's just call it garbage, being streamed out there when it comes to how churches are and what they're doing. That's not necessarily helping us. That is part of the marketing strategy that we need to pay attention to. What are we actually putting out there? Are we answering the questions that people are actually asking? or are we just talking to hear ourselves talk? And so, again, people will not invite their friends, family, and coworkers if they're not proud of what they're actually inviting them to participate in and experience. And so maybe what you work on is we create one special weekend in the fall or one special weekend in the spring that we're going to go all out and we're going to heighten the quality, and that'll go a long ways. But I would say at the same time, it comes down to even how the Sunday experience, let's say the service, is carried out in and of itself. Are you taking time to explain why we do communion to people that may have no understanding what communion is all about? If you're going to do communion in your service, don't just expect that everybody that walks in the doors of your church actually understand why we do communion in the church. This is a great teaching moment. This is a discipleship moment. And so, for instance, even for us, every time we take communion, I sit down and I just say, hey, I want to talk to everybody for a moment. This is why we take communion. This is what communion is for. This is why we as people of the church value communion and talk about how it's a reminder to us on a regular basis of where we were and what Jesus has done to redeem us, to bring us back into his grace, bring us back into his relationship. And then I always take a moment and address people and say, hey, some of you here, this may be your first time ever experiencing church. First of all, we're glad you're here. And so you want to speak as though there are non-Christians in the room. If you speak as though there are non-Christians in the room, your regular churchgoers will actually bring their non-Christians to friend because they know you're being sensitive to that. And so, for instance, in that communion, I'll say, hey, some of you, maybe you've never been to church. First of all, we're really glad you're here. But I would hate to be the type of person that would ask you to do something that meant nothing to you. And so I recognize if you've never placed your faith in walking with Jesus, communion doesn't mean anything to you. So just let it pass. Just enjoy this moment. But I'm going to challenge you right now, right where you are. Would you consider just praying a simple prayer and just say, God, if you're real, would you reveal yourself to me? Because I believe our God will actually answer that prayer. And so it's just looking, how do we tweak our moments? How do we budget our time accordingly to make sure that we're actually addressing people in the room that have no prior church experience? If you're going to use big theological terms, even in your preaching or somewhere in the service, make sure you take a moment and just explain that. I have no problems using the term propitiation, for instance, in a sermon, but I'm going to make sure that I take necessary time to explain what propitiation is for those that have very little church experience, maybe new to the faith, or have no faith experience at all as well. And so, again, think through, are we giving people an actual reason to invite their friends, family, and coworkers? Create the expectation that this is just who we are as a church. Like, we regularly are a church that's thinking about people that aren't here yet. And so what does that mean? How does that mean we act? If you're needing to add a service, that's a great moment to create that cultural moment. But again, you want to make it so normal that people feel like they're abnormal if they're not participating and inviting their friends and sharing Jesus with those around them. Every baptism service for us, I just teach on baptism. I don't continue a series. I don't start a series. I simply take a solid 25, 30 minutes and just teach on baptism. And almost every time, it's almost the identical conversation. And once I started doing that, I noticed our baptism numbers actually improved greatly because people were getting educated on a regular basis. Even our church people being reminded what baptism means for me personally and what it means for us as a community. But then I would always finish off the communion or baptism service by just having this moment with our congregation saying, hey, each person that got baptized today is there because somebody had the courage to actually share Jesus with them, to engage them in conversation, not judge them based on where they were in the past, but love them and spoke truth to them. In 3 months, for instance, we're going to do this again. So I'm just going to ask you a question. Who's going to get baptized because of you? And so you're normalizing, this is who we are. This is how we operate as a church. And so create that expectation for everybody that calls your church home. And your culture will become that much more inviting. Then you want to take time regularly and just train your people. Train your guest services team on a regular basis. How do we do this? How do we learn to be a friendly church? Where do we cross the line from friendly to creepy? You want to train your people about that, and then give moments regularly throughout the year where you as a church, you as a staff team, you as a leadership team, you just dedicate your time to praying for those in the community that are far from Jesus. Pray for open doors. Pray for people by name. Some of the most powerful seasons of the life of our church were when we had people actually write down names of those that they were going to pray for over the next month or 2 months or even during the summer months. And we actually put them up on the wall so people could see this wall of names of people that were being prayed for. And we just talked about it on a regular basis, and we brought it up, and it just served as a constant reminder. This is who we are as a church. So pay attention to those little landmarks along the way. Now, how that leads into the marketing conversation. The way we need to think about marketing is simply this. Every church, yes, you have a marketing plan. The only difference is that some are better than others. Even if you're like, yeah, we really don't do anything for marketing. Well, you are still marketing. It just comes back to interpersonal communication. You're always communicating something, even if it's not without words. And so the way that your campus looks when people drive up is a marketing engagement. That's part of your marketing plan. Are we happy with the product that we're putting out there? From the moment that people walk through the doors, they check their children in. That's all a part of the marketing process of who we are as a church and how we are opening the doors to communicate. The most important thing to us is Jesus and the gospel. How are we breaking down walls? How are we creating that invite? Are we so abnormal in the way that our building looks? We're so outdated in our approach or in our language that in itself, our marketing out there is ostracizing us from opportunities to actually share the gospel. And so I would encourage you, find a team of people, find people that are bought in, and just start from zero. How are we actually building? How are we communicating? Are people, is this an inviting place for people to come and actually experience Jesus? Or are we doing things that are actually handcuffing our ability to be able to do that? And there's 3 areas you want to think about when it comes to that. Social media, direct marketing, and word of mouth. What are we posting? Are we posting? Are we happy with what we're posting? Is it working? If you don't know if it's working, ask some of the young people in your life of your church to give you feedback and allow them to be bluntly honest with you, and then invite them to help you make changes if you need to make changes. Direct marketing. Does direct marketing work today? That's the big question I know we always get. Yes, it does, but it needs to be done well. There is good direct marketing and there is bad direct marketing, and bad direct marketing is just a waste of your money. Think about it from this standpoint. If you're going to send something in the mail, who tends to go to the mailbox? I know in my family, and what I found out when I poll people over the years of having this conversation, majority of households, the woman, the wife, tends to be the one that goes to the mailbox. If you're doing a direct marketing mailer, for instance, and it isn't appealing to her, then it's going to get thrown away before it ever gets considered and looked at and read and talked about in the life of that home. And so we began to actually, anytime we do a direct marketing, we actually did it in such a way that it would be appealing to women with the hope that then it would embrace a conversation maybe with their spouse. Hey, we should probably check this church out. And that when we began to make some of those small switches, we saw an improvement when it came to overall engagement of the direct marketing. And then lastly is word of mouth. Word of mouth is always going to be the best play when it comes to any marketing plan. And again, it comes back to what we just talked about. People don't invite people to average, to mediocrity. And so you want to give them an experience and a reason to invite those around them. That's a quick conversation on inviting and creating that inviting culture in the life of your church. Love to be able to continue to dialogue with you, answer any type of questions that maybe you have specifically to Facebook, Instagram, social media, direct marketing, just overall marketing campaigns. Let me know how I can help.